Bill Carroll, Zennie62 Media, and making our way once again through 32 teams, 32 days. And as mentioned previously, I try to look at sort of sometimes culture and philosophy as well as just actual players. The Cardinals were a team that developed from within, sort of like the Packers and the Steelers, and I'm talking about the front office developing from within. For the first time in a long time, when they brought in Monti Ossenfort, whose background is from the Patriots and the Titans, it was a departure. Obviously, and most recently, they had Steve Keim, who started with the organization as a scout in 1999 and was up there with them. Eventually, spent almost 10 years as their general manager before he eventually retired due to health reasons. They interviewed, I think, 9 people for the position, to include their own internals, like Quentin Harris, their vice president of player personnel, also Adrian Wilson, who's the director of, who's another VP of pro personnel, also Matt Harris, who is director of football administration, and I mentioned Ossenfort, also Ian Cunningham, who's an assistant GM with the Bears, Jerry Reese, formerly of the Giants, and the Ravens player personnel director, Joe Horitz. Eventually he went with Ossenfort, and he's going to, I believe, based on the things I've heard, bring some of that sort of patriot culture, meaning that smart players looking at very specific types of metrics and things that probably have to do with production in situations, particularly sort of high value and difficult situations. And I'm going to back up to 2020. There was a lot of optimism, right? Filling the air of the desert back in that time. Steve Keim was still the guy. They had acquired DeAndre Hopkins. They had gotten out from under the David Johnson contract and were very happy about that. They clearly won that deal. They brought in some important pieces, or good pieces, or pieces they expected to be difference makers on defense in free agents like Devin Kennard, Devondre Campbell, Trevon Coley, and Jared Phillips had all been added. They drafted Isaiah Simmons. They drafted Josh Jones. Obviously, Kyler Murray was their quarterback of in those days, the present and the future. Larry Fitzgerald was still on the team, but being phased out. Christian Kirk was becoming a wide receiver 1. Kenyon Drake and Chase Edmonds were sort of splitting the running back duties. And so you had a team at the time that I think most people believed was heading in the right direction, pointed in the way up, blah, blah, blah. And their expectation based on those moves and the depth chart they had, of course, Murray was starting quarterback. They also had Brett Hundley, who was believed to be a talented young backup at the time, Drew Anderson, and Chris Streveler, who actually ended up playing a little bit, was on the roster, CFL, and not Big Sky. No, it's the Big Sky. Big Sky Country legend. And then I mentioned Drake, Edmonds, and Eno Benjamin, and DJ Foster amongst the running backs. Wide receivers included DeAndre Hopkins, Andy Isabella, AJ Richardson, and Shane Leatherberry. Christian Kirk in the slot with Brent Sherfield, Hakeem Butler, sharing the slot with Fitzgerald, so he's playing some Z as well. But Brent Sherfield, Hakeem Butler, who a lot of people liked but never quite panned out, and Devin Phelps. And then, of course, Larry Fitzgerald, winding his career down with Keyshawn, Keesean, Keyshawn Johnson, no relation, Johnny Dixon, and JoJo Ward. At tight end, they had XX Max Williams, a player that I really didn't like coming out of college, and I feel a little bit justified. Wasn't super productive, was a little bit overaged, and undersized. It's not a great combination. But you add to that, they also had Daryl Daniels, Dan Arnold, who some people really liked, and Dylan Cantrell. They had DJ Humphries at left tackle, along with Joshua Miles, the small school guy I liked a little bit, along with Brett Toth and Jackson Dennis. Then they had Justin Pugh, once again was people were high on coming out of Syracuse. I wondered about his lower body strength, ability to anchor, and power. Sam Jones and Steven Gonzalez, Mason Cole, and Lamont Gilliard at center, and then at the right guard spot you had J.R. Sweezy, Max Garcia, and Andrew Dickinson. Right tackle was Marcus Gilbert. They also had Josh Jones, Justin Murray, and Jake Benziger. So the belief at the time was that they should be a fairly explosive offense. And on defense, they had Zach Allen, a big-bodied, sort of 5 technique type. Michael Dugbe, who I did like. I think UMass, a typical by way of UMass, I think. Richard Lawrence and TJ Carter. They had Jordan Phillips, of course, one of the big free agent signees, along with Leke Fotu and Miles Brown. At right defensive end, they had Corey Peters, who was really a defensive tackle by trade, but, playing 5 technique, sort of Warren Sapp kind of situation when his time with the Raiders. Jonathan Bullard, Sharon Coley, and Adam Schuler. And then outside linebacker, they had Chandler Jones, of course, was another great acquisition. Kyle Fitz, Vontarius Dora, and then Jordan Hicks on the inside, along with Devondre Campbell, another big signee. Tanner Vallejo, who never quite panned out for, anyone, and Evan Weaver. And, of course, their rookie, Isaiah Simmons, who is now a prized possible piece moving in a trade this year. But they also had Dennis Gardeck, who, of course, is a terrific special teamer, and Ezekiel Turner, Devin Kennard and Hassan Reddick, Patrick Peterson, who's now a Steeler, but they also had Kevin Peterson, no relation, backing up, Chris Jones, Duke Thomas, and Zane Lewis, and then Robert Alford, Jace Whitaker, and Bajor Wilson. And the slot corner was Byron Murphy. They also had Jalen Davis and Jaron Williams. I really like Byron Murphy. Of course, Buda Baker at free safety, Chris Banjo, and Charles Washington. And then rounding it out, they had Jalen Thompson. And he was backed up by both Delonte Thompson, no relation, and Reggie Floyd. So, no, this is a defense that was expected to be optimistic. They have some pass rushers. They had improved their linebacker quantity and quality in terms of talent and depth. But sadly, none of that really mattered when it all came to a head. Now, a few other things to mention about that team. They had Zane Gonzalez, and then in return specialists with Christian Kirk and Andy Isabella, Andy Lee, punter, and their long snapper was Aaron Brewer. The 2023 draft brought the Cardinals, once again, some players that they expect to, pencil in right away, like Paris Johnson and B.J. Ojolari. Johnson, pick 6. At pick 41, B.J. Ojolari. Garrett Williams at pick 72. Michael Wilson, pick 94, a possible steal. I really like getting John Gaines a second at pick 122. I think that might be the most, in terms of value and fit, might be one of the most terrific picks they've made. Clayton Tune, a possible backup, guy with some talent, up and down on tape, but you could see his athletic ability, his arm. Owen Papo, the freak show athlete, undersized but extremely athletic linebacker. Kentrell Clark, an undersized but very athletic slot corner type from Louisville. Dante Stills. Okay, maybe this is right there with the John Gaines pick. I am such a big fan of Dante Stills. Super productive, very athletic, can play probably some 5, 4-eye, as well as 3 technique. I don't understand why he was available so late. He tested well, great great Stills bloodlines, a brother and a father who played in the league. Not sure why he was available where he's available, but if it turns out he's not good, then I'll eat it, but I just think he'll go down as another great pick. So, currently the depth chart on offense is sort of an undersized group, sort of. Well, they've added some size in this draft, but Marquise Brown, who came a couple of years ago from Baltimore, along with Michael Wilson, Auden Tate, so those 2 guys are big. And Daniel Arias, who probably is a special teamer, may be a practice squatter as a college free agent. Rondell Moore, I'm going to say it. I think it's a breakout year for him. I could end up looking like an idiot. But Rondell Moore, I think, is going to have that breakout season that we've all been expecting with Andre Buscella, who sounds like a classical musician, but it's not. He's another guy that came by way of San Francisco. Javon Wims, yes, another 49er as well. I don't know why I keep seeing so many 49ers on other teams' rosters. Greg Dortch, who I like more than most, is installed at the slot with Zach Pascal, the former Eagle, and Brian Cobbs, another college free agent behind him. DJ Humphries is still left tackle, joined by Dennis Daly, Julian Davenport, and they have Trevor Badera, who's a guy that's likely to sort of maybe be a practice squad or maybe be in the mix to start it, well, back up at one or two positions. And you guessed it, another San Francisco 49er. Paris Johnson's already penciled in at left guard, but I assume he's being groomed to be left tackle. I would hope. Elijah Wilkinson is backing him up along with Hayden Howerton, and then Harjay Foltholt. Foltholt is right now the center. Lasita Smith, who is a guard by trade but is backing him up at center, and then Will Hernandez, who I liked probably more than I should have, got a UTEP coming out, is at right guard, backed up by John Gaines, who I think is going to be a starter sooner rather than later. Marquise Haynes by way of Ole Miss, and then Lashavius Simmons, who I mentioned previously was drafted by the Bears, but then spent a year with San Francisco, now makes it there. Kelvin Beachum at right tackle is another guy that probably be better served being a swing. He's not bad, but he's a guy that you're still going to be looking to replace. Josh Jones, who was drafted in 2000 in the third round, who's become a backup. Jackson Barton from unrestricted free agent from the Raiders. And then, of course, tight end. I guess a bright spot for them because they have Zach Ertz. I think this is going to be a breakout year for Trey McBride. They may go two tight end, also a fair amount. Chris Pierce and Noah Togiai, as well as Bernard Selkovitz, are guys that are going to be fighting it out for that third tight end spot, along with the Blake Whitehart from, I really like Blake Whitehart, the Wake Forest college free agent who had really good chemistry with Sam Hartman in college, and then Joe Hungerford, who is another guy that, if Hungerford makes it, is going to be mostly as a practice squatter. Quarterback, Kyler Murray is still on the depth chart at number one, but he's not going to be playing, and he's not initially, so it's going to be Colt McCoy, Clayton Tune, Jeff Driscoll kind of fighting it out, and David Blau is at least theoretically in that mix as well, though I'll be somewhat surprised if he sees significant time, unless there's a swath of injuries. Still have James Conner, though, like many other players that we're going to mention, he's supposedly available in terms of, if somebody wants to make a trade proposal. They have Keontae Ingram, the Texas by way of USC player, or maybe around USC by way of Texas. Corey Clement, the veteran sort of, not plotter, but no-nonsense downhill back. Tyson Williams, who has flashed at times in his career, and then Imari DeMarco, formerly of TCU. I think, I'm assuming that at least four of those guys make the team, and maybe one of them is on the practice squad. Looking at their defense, Jonathan Ledbetter has once again another former San Francisco player is listed as starter at defensive end. Nose tackles Leki Fotu, who I mentioned previously when we talked about 2020, and Rashard Lawrence at D tackle. So once again, they're at least basing out of an odd front. The backups at defensive end include L.J. Collier, Ben Stile, and Eric Banks, as well. That's on one side, and then also they are going to be playing with. Well, I guess it's sort of a situation where they have essentially two tackles and one defensive end. But Dante Stills, Kevin Strong are fighting out to back up Rashard Lawrence. And I once again, my money's on Dante Stills. I've said it before, I'll say it again. And then on the nose, backing up Fotu, you have Carlos Watkins and Jacob Slade. Jacob Slade is another guy I like. College free agent, a guy that's got really good lower body power and balance and scrap. Like tough. Like he really plays like he clearly wants to play football and wants to make life tough on you. At the linebacker positions, and once again, these guys, since they're odd front linebackers, one or two of these guys are basically just stand-up defensive ends. But Amaje Sanders, formerly of Cincinnati, who they drafted in the third round in 2022. B.J. Ojolari was in the second in this year's draft, and I think he's going to see significant snaps. And behind him, Jesse Luketa, who some people were super high on. I was a little worried about how raw he was, but interesting Canadian player who I think, hangs around as a depth piece. I'm a huge Zaven Collins fan. I'm predicting this is his breakout year. And then he's got Chris Barnes, as well as Josh Woods and Marvin Pierre behind him. And then Kazir White, right, the more successful of the White brothers, Kevin White's brother, who's going to be starting at right inside linebacker with the very fast Owen Papo and Zico Turner and Kyle Soale behind him. And then the other tight end, Cameron Thomas, who's really just a stand-up defensive end. I'm a fan of him. I think it's a breakout season for him as well, though the team's going to be bad. I think he's going to probably put up about 7.5 or 8 sacks. And then we've got Victor Dimukeje from Duke and Dennis Gardecki. Once again, both Thomas and Dimukeje are both really defensive ends who stand up. Gardeck, who I call Gardecki, the bumps, is a legitimate linebacker. And then at the cornerback position, I think there's still kind of a battle between Hamilton, and though he's penciled in right now, and Garrett Williams. I knew I was going to do that. Garrett Williams with Rashad Fenton, Bobby Price, who's really sort of a safety hybrid type, and Quavian White battling it out. Also, the other corner, they have Marco Wilson, Christian Matthews, Chris Boyd, former Minnesota Viking. Also, Nate Hairston and Dylan Mabin. I like Dylan Mabin. He's a bubble guy. He may or may not make the team, but if he makes it, watch out for him to contribute on special teams, and if he gets on the field, to be better than people think. The safeties, of course, Budda Baker, another guy who's pushing to get out of there, and I think they want to accommodate him, but he's on the team for the moment. Also, they've got Juju Hughes, and in addition to Jojo Hughes, Javonte Moffett. Javonte Moffitt's another small school guy, and a guy I think is better than people think. Well, hopefully he gets a chance to show what he can do. And last but not least, at the other safety spot, you've got Jalen Thompson, Josh Thomas, and Adrian Chachere, who is a San Jose State graduate, if memory serves it correctly. Matt Houck is the punter, and they've also brought in Nolan Cooney, who is, yes, you guessed it, another 49er, to give him a little competition, former 49er, to give him some competition. Matt Prater came over there from Delaware as the place kicker. Aaron Brewer is the long snapper. They also brought Matt Himbrow in to give him a push. And Houck also is responsible for the both kickoff and punting. Not kickoff. Prater, sorry, is responsible for both kickoff and field goals. And then Holder is Houck, who also is the punter. And then Dortch, it handles both the kickoffs as well as punting. This is not going to be a good year for the Arizona Cardinals. This is news to probably absolutely no one. But they have some bright spots and bright pieces, some of which may be moved via trades. But if this team, say, does package and move along from players like Ertz to a contender that loses a tight end and needs one, if a team that wants a thus far underutilized but really talented linebacker like Zaven Collins or Isaiah Simmons and maybe Budda Baker, maybe with 3 or 4 players that have value and bring back most likely draft picks, and if they have the year I think they might have, this team will probably be picking the first 3 or 4 picks, and they'll have the ammunition needed to trade up if they decide they want to go after a guy like Caleb Williams. But it's going to be a tough year in the desert. So that's it for this particular installment of 32 Teams in 32 Days. Bill Carroll for Zennie62 Media, and I'll see you soon with the next team.